welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, I will be talking about classes and objects in object-oriented programming. I still find it sometimes for beginners, it is hard to differentiate between a class and an object. So I thought to give it a shot, and it may help you if you're confused about it. So we do know that, or I assume that you know that object-oriented programming is the concept of creating a program and using it multiple times or not repeating much, and also the idea of replicating the real-world objects into code. So for example, a company has employees, and employees are people, and people get paid their salary, and company has the expenses. The company needs to track its own expenses, how much they're spending each month or each year. And then we have employees and the number of hours they put in the company. So all these things that at one stage you need, for example, you need to create a web application or a software that you want to store the data and use it. So to write these concepts into program, either in applications like desktop-based user interface or web application. And now the simple way to do that is using object-oriented programming. So now let's talk about class and objects. What are the difference? So I would say that one of the easiest example is comparing factories and the products. So let's say that Tesla, or if you want to build a car factory, like you want to have a company that you want to produce cars and you want to sell it to people. So how many companies or how many infrastructure do you need to build to create 1,000,000 cars? So for example, Ford, think about one area. They have a big company, like a big physical infrastructure in one place. And that one infrastructure creates millions of cars in a decade. And the same thing for Toyota, Tesla, all these things. So how many factories do you need to produce 1,000,000 car? I mean, you can have more, but how many can produce that if you give it enough time? So physically, or you would think like one is enough, like main company. We would want to limit our stuff to one area, because anything can be in this world multiple, and expand the company. So I don't want you to get confused about that. So you can have one company, and that company can produce thousands, millions of cars, depending on the time. So now think, if you just only build one manufacturing company, and that's only used to produce one car, how expensive that car will be. So, and if you keep building one physical infrastructure and that will only create one car, is that really useful? So in object-oriented programming, you build one factory, and in that factory you put all the engineers, you put all the machines, you put all the requirements and the design and the look, the map, the blueprint, the template for what you want to produce, like the vision. You put all people together, and they come like, okay, like industrial engineers, they will say like, oh, I will design this car and this should look like a fish. And they would all work together to produce a car that will look like a fish. And once they have all those ideas, they have to think that, is this possible to design a car which will look like a fish? Because we have a lot of ideas, but some of them are based on the time and infrastructure. It's not possible to build it at that time. Like we have Tesla now. Like imagine people talking about Tesla like 2 centuries ago. So based on the need and what is available to people to build at that time. So the point is, when you build a factory, you want to have the industrial engineers, industrial design engineers, and you have the other engineers. They will come and talk about the design, what kind of hardware they can put together, what needs to be created there. At the final stage, all of them need to be assembled, like all these parts, pieces, that everyone has created, they all need to get together, and once it's finished, then that's a product and it will be introduced to the market. So the same concept is for a class. For a class in object-oriented programming, you think about what attributes are required for the object you want to use. So let's move to object now and then come back about both of them. So now that you have a nice building infrastructure, that it has all the engineers, it has the technicians, everyone, and it has all the machineries, that it produces all the parts and all these things. But all these parts that you want to build, it has to be in a concept. If it is out of a concept or a context, it's not usable. So all those engineers, when they are working in the factory, they have to come to one idea, like what this car should look like, what color it should have, what we should name the model, what we should name the speed, like how much should be the speed limit, and how much it will cost us, and how much time it will take to produce it. So all these people that you have in the company, like in the factory, the people with the skills, they will come to final conclusion that I want to have all these machines in order to produce this car. So you design each step of what your car should look like. And that's the same thing. You design a class. In that class, you design, or the engineers, or the programmer, anyone you name it. Let's stick to the factory. So you build a factory, you have all the engineers, they all come together and they decide to build a car, and each one talk what is possible to put together in this car. And once all those things are defined, like name, color, year, everything mapped out, and all the machinery parts are there, then they start producing that car or vehicle. So now there are two phases. So we have the class, which all the concepts, ideas, what needs to be done, and how the product should look like happens at the factory, which is the class. And in object, once you create that, that's your object, and this will be based on the idea. It will be the product. So it's produced after going through the process. So the third phase is, for example, the car gets out to the market and the user uses it. So now take a look. We have a manufacturing company. It puts all the car's pieces together. And once it's ready, assembled, so now this is the result. This is the product. This is the produce we get. So we put all these concept ideas there, and we want that car should look like this. So once we put it together and then we run it and the manufacturing happens, then it produces these objects for us. And then we will have different color of those objects with different names. But look, what are common in these cars? They have tires, they have steering wheels, they have engine, they have batteries. All these are common stuff because it's been designed in the blueprint what it needs to have by engineers here. So at the end of the day, they share a lot of things. Or one object, like this object, they're all like the same model, only colors will change. But the thing is, look, one factory have produced hundreds of these and only colors change, nothing else. So like the colors and seats, but physical appearance is the same, like general is the same. So that's the idea. This is a class and that's the vision. And once you put this idea here and you decide what to put, you get the product and you get the aggregation, like the total numbers you want. So one of these, hundreds of these, millions of these, millions of those with different attributes. So I hope that this helped a little bit to understand, but we will also see a code example so we know to connect the points. So a little more explanation. So just think of a class as a factory and an object, a product. Factories produce objects. We know that all the decision how the object should look like is made at the factory. And this is all the attributes that's been given, decided before implementing it. So once this company runs, starts a production, it will keep producing these things. And it will be these variables will be the same, but inside this the value will keep changing. The model will change, the color will change, the year will change, but it's the same car. You have a blue car of a Ford, you can have a white car of a Ford, so, or a Tesla, whatever you like. So I did type the code here to save time, because sometimes typing the code takes a little bit longer and the video automatically gets to 30 minutes or faster. So we have a class level. You know, like in a company has its own responsibility. For example, it will calculate its efficiency, how many cars it's producing, how much a car is costing. So all these things can be asked the factory, like what it is doing. And then there's attributes for what you want the factory to produce. So these attributes are staying inside the factory, like the cost, the number of production, they all stays inside the factory. But what you're selling outside is what you're designing, that you want these things to be sold outside. So let's go one at a time. So I want my factory to know how many cars are produced per day. And then I want to make sure that whenever I call this function, it tells me, when I ask this function that how many cars are produced so far, it will tell me the numbers. Look at this. This is private static int. That means this is available at the class level. That means this is the first counter, the guy who's counting the number of production inside the company. So you go to the company, you find this guy, it tells you the number. That's it. So now we go to the object. Now these are the things we want to produce and sell it outside the market. So these things gets created at this factory, but it's not staying there. We just keep giving it, selling it, all the production. But we do track like how many of these we have created, or some of the things that we want to save. So we want, for example, now our factory is Tesla. We want to produce cars, and we want at the Tesla itself, we want to know how many we produced, and we want our car to have these attributes. So in object, we are giving these attributes. Attributes just a definition of connecting something to a person. For example, a person has a hand, face, name, ethnicity, identity. These are all the attributes we give them, like a white person, a black person, a brown person, and whatever, all these attributes that we have. I mean, we're all human and we have different attributes. So all the same thing and the same concept, like it's just to defining it, knowing it, what the object is. And now we come to constructor. At the time of instantiation, we want to create these objects. I say like, okay, whenever I want to produce a car, whenever in this factory I decide to produce one car, and that car should have all these attributes. And there is one difference. This one is the object, so I give the data, like this goes through the production, and it connects all the variables, it produces a car. The only difference is this one is staying in the company. I keep tracking of it. So it has got nothing to do with each time a new car is produced, I automatically increment the number. Like, okay, I produced one car, I get the number. But this is what I'm producing outside and giving it to the consumers. So this is a class level, which we have here a factory level. And these are the objects, which means that each one of these will be its own box. Like each car, if you want information about this car, you need to go open that car and see what it has got. Like the colors, everything will change. And you will look at this in a bit. So the last method I have done here is just for printing information about the cars we create. That's it. When you do that string, when you add this method, if you do a system.print out, it will print this whole information. You don't have to do each one, like first car.model.year, that stuff. Okay, so let's look at this. I have a tester class. Let me save this one first. I have a tester class. So I want to produce my first car. And this car is Model 3 of Tesla. And these are all the information it has. Okay, and I want to print that. I want to see this car. Print. So now this is produced to the market. Look, this in here, this is all the information about this car. We created this one as the first car sent to the market, but at the company level, I want to ask how many cars I produced today. And I'm going to run this again because you see this is a class level method or object. It's a static at class level, which is a factory level. The difference here, we instantiated. You see, like Tesla, we want an object type of Tesla that the company, we want this model, and we give all the information. So what we are saying is, in this company, there is a blueprint. Get all these information and put it in this one. That's what pretty much you're saying. You're saying that Tesla has this design to create this data, this car, and once you create this car, then call that Model 3 and whatever you want to keep naming it based on the name. So back to the code, we are saying that this class create an object from this class, like this is the class, create an object, and this is the limitation we have given in the constructor, give it all these names, and this will become an object. So in here we are saying that what is the object I printed, like what's the car that I produced. It tells me this is the car that you produced. And in production, I asked the factory guy, like, how many did you produce? It says I produced 1. So now my production is speeding up. I'm creating more. And now if I'm only printing 1. So if I run it again, I say like, how many I produced? It says 3, but it's only printing the first one because we haven't printed the other 2. Let's print the other 2. And once we do that, now we have 3 cars produced, and the number we have only printed it here, but if I print one more copy, it will keep telling me at that stage how many are produced. So we have the first object. We know that the total is 3. Look at this part. You get a 3 here, you get a 3 there, because this is a class level. That means that this method is tracing how many is produced. Doesn't matter where you count it, where you call it, it's gonna tell you the exact copies of the product. So wherever you call, unless you change its status from class to object. Okay, so now we have produced 3 cars. It doesn't matter where you call this, so you get the total instantiation. It's based on this number. If you destroy one, it's gonna decrease. I have to get rid of this one. So now I have 2 cars produced. Okay, let's add that one back. And the last thing I want to point out here is when you look at this, just compare it, easily compare. Like for example, I would say int serial number equals to 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want to go too far, it's integer. So we're saying that the type is integer, and the variable that I want to connect this variable we are declaring is called serial number, and it's holding type of integer, and put this number inside this. So now compare this. We are saying the type is Tesla, which is the class we designed. This one is designed by Java, but we took all the methods like the string and integer that designed by Java. We created a class of our own. We say like my object, like this serial number, needs to look like this, needs to inherit all this stuff that is there. It needs to be this type. What is that type? That type has a model string, that has another string, that has an integer string and a string. So we want this, like we combine type integer and string inside this, and we created a new variable called model 3, and that is based on this Tesla that we designed. So technically you have designed a data type. So that's compare that one if you get confused. So I hope that helped. I mean, that's pretty much about it. You design a class, and then in that class you have 2 levels. One, you decide what you want the objects to be, and the other one you decide whatever objects are created, what needs to happen. Count all of them, trace them, and all those things, like a two-level operation. And we saw that one of the easy uses to count the number of objects you're producing, but there are other examples. Like a bank needs to know how many bank accounts it created or closed. So, yeah, please feel free to leave me any comment. And if you have any confusion still, let me know, and I will try to answer it. So that's pretty much in summary. We have class, and we design it once, and we have objects that we instantiate, where we create objects from that class. That's it. You see this one Tesla, 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 but everything here keeps changing. And now we have one object, another object. We have three objects, but all of them are based on one class. So class is pretty much copied or instantiated. It just inherits, takes everything from the class. And that's what the object is created after you run the new keyword on a class. Okay, I think that's enough of talking. So please feel free to leave any comment if you have any question.